All right, in this video, we're going to step it up a little bit with the complicated level of curtain walls, and we're going to start using these other two curtain walls. Before we get into that, I'm going to quickly hide these wainscot versions so that we can see the full size height ones. Let's crack this one open and just take a look at its type properties. So some of this will be familiar from the last video. So if we look in the first section under curtain panel, in the previous version where it's just crown and base, we didn't have a panel at all inside the wall. But in this case, we are wanting a panel. This rectangle is it's a panel, a curtain wall panel. So it's already selected, and we could change that. If we want them to be elliptical, we could change them to be elliptical and hit apply, and you'll see that it changes that. If we want like the square clipped, we could do that. Let's maybe leave it that way. And then the next thing we could do is, or that's different from what I showed you before, is there is vertical grid settings in this one. Before there were none, and so we didn't worry about it. But here, we are having it automatically put curtain grids in for us. And it's set to a maximum space, to use a rule called maximum spacing. So we're going to tell it 2 feet is as wide as I want a panel to be before you cut a new one. So that can be anything. We could change it to 3 feet and hit apply, and you'll see it relays out the wall. We could also choose different rules. We could do a fixed number, fixed number, and click apply. And that didn't do much here. Or a fixed distance. So instead of making it a max, it will always do 3 feet. And if you hit apply, you'll see that it does 3 foot, 3 feet, and then one panel is going to be the remainder of what's left on the wall. I rarely use that rule. So I'm just going to go back to maximum spacing. We'll keep it at 3 feet and hit apply. All right, so that's what that's doing, is it's putting those curtain grids in. But you'll notice there's no mullions along those grids. That's because if you look down at the vertical mullions, we have none listed. And we also don't break up the wall in horizontal grids, but we could, so let's change that as well. Let's do maximum spacing, let's do 3 and hit apply. And you'll see that now it cuts the wall up using a maximum spacing of 3 feet. And we could change it to 2 feet if we wanted, and you can see what that does. But we're going to get rid of that for now. Click none and hit apply. Let's cancel that out. Let's undo everything because I'm starting to mess it up. Okay. All right. So that's everything. And then the final item, the horizontal mullions, you're familiar with that already from the last video. It's just our base and our crown moldings. So again, we've created these so that you already have a base, but you can always feel free to come in and edit those to make the kind of wall you want. Right, so that's basically how you would do an applied version. So let's take this in to our example or the project we've been working on. I'll paste it in. And now what's cool is, since we've already laid this room out, if we just want to redo the room with all of this applied molding, we can. We'll just use the match tool. We'll select our wall and then hover over our curtain walls that we already put in place. Oh, the only thing is, let's undo that. This should be 9 feet high to match our other walls. Now we'll use the match tool and we'll click on these 3 walls. And now we have quickly made this room fancier without any real effort on our part. It remembered that we had our chair rail in there already, and so it kept the chair rail. It just replaced the panels, and it added our curtain grid to the wall. Now, the only thing, as usual, is going to be the opening. So we're going to temporarily hide that door. And you can see our 2 curtain grids that we added on either side of the door, but then they've put an extra curtain grid on the inside. And if I select it, you'll see that it's pinned. And this is going to confuse people too. I can't delete. For some reason, this is just a thing in Revit with curtain walls. If the grid was placed there by the rules of the curtain wall, meaning it was using this maximum spacing rule and it put that grid in, you cannot delete it. You can move it. So I could respace it so that it was 2 feet. Okay, I can move it around, but I can't delete it, which it can sometimes be frustrating. So I'm going to show you a couple workarounds for that. But before we get into that, let's just clean up the door. You'll see that once we clean up this opening, there's no need to delete the grid, but deleting the grid would be cleaner in my opinion, because we don't need a grid there, so we should get rid of it. So let's clean it up. All we need to do is delete this base. So we need to click on it and unpin, and then we can delete it. So what else do we have going through the door? Now we've got these two lower panels, and we're going to unpin those, and we're going to delete those. But here's the thing. You think you can delete them, but you can't. So again, because these are not mullions that are applied to it, these are panels, there always has to be a panel inside of a curtain wall. So what you have to do is you have to kind of trick it. You can't just delete the panel because then it doesn't know what to do when there's no panel in there. What you have to do is put an empty panel in there. So if you go over here, and in here there's something called an empty system panel. You're going to click that, and it'll look like it's putting something in there, but it's really nothing. So the panels now disappear. So now we've just got to deal with the top panels. So the instinct would be to just put an empty panel in. So we can do that. So if I go here and here, I unpin them, and then I put an empty panel, just like we did for the lower part. That may or may not be correct, depending on what you're trying to do. But if you want a panel above the door, then you're going to have to do something different than what we just did. You don't want an empty panel there. You still need a panel, but you just need one panel that spans the top of the door. And I'm also looking, it looks like when we did our change, it also added another curtain grid here. So here's our curtain grid that goes to the door casing, and here's a new one that it added on its own. So we're going to unpin that. And again, you can't delete it, you can only move it. So there's a couple strategies. I can show you how to get rid of the curtain grid. That'll be option 2. Option 1 only works in this case. Basically, we have 2 extra curtain grids, one here and one here. And then we have 2 curtain grids that we placed on our own on either side. Because we placed those on our own and it wasn't the rule of the wall that placed them, we're actually able to delete those. So I'm going to delete the 2 that I placed. And then what I'm going to do is move those to the edge of the door. So basically, I deleted the 2 I placed, and I'm using the 2 that Revit put in automatically to build my door opening. So that's why I call this item 1, and it's just because we got lucky in this one case. But I'm showing it to you because I want you to be able to, with curtain walls, you have to be able to think outside of the box when things aren't working. So this is just one option. So let's show our door, and let's realign those curtain grids. I'm gonna hide my door again. Let's take this curtain grid and let's drag it over here so that we can see it when our door is showing. Okay, so we've got this curtain grid that we want to move to the jamb. So I'm going to use the align tool, and I'm going to align that to the jamb. Oh, I don't think I did that right. I think I selected the wrong surface. There we go. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, so that also fixed partially our problem above the door. So now I'm going to temporarily hide that again. And now we need all of the panels we just deleted, we need to put them back in. So, and we need to put the mullion at the bottom back in. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to unpin it, and I'm going to delete that one because we don't need it. We also don't need the chair rail. So we're going to delete that out of the door opening. I'm going to take this and I'm going to set it to an empty panel after I unpin it. Okay, so this side looks mostly right. This side's still messed up a little bit. So all we need to do is enter the mullion command and place, oh, this is something I should teach you. When you are placing a mullion, you have several options up here. By default, it'll put the mullion along the whole grid line where there isn't already a mullion. Or you can pick to just put it along the segment that you choose. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to click there and it'll put it just there. I'm going to put a mullion there as well. And then you can see this one doesn't match the base. So I'm just going to use the match command. I'm going to match that. And then this one I think already matches. So we're good there. Okay, so now the last thing we need to do is put the panels back in. So I'm going to tab, select until I get the panels, and I'm going to change it from, well, it'll be easier to just use the match command. Let's use match command. I'm going to select this panel, and I'm going to tell those panels to match. So it puts the panels back in. Now, the last thing we got to figure out is above the door. So basically, we need the panel to stop here, which means we've got to add another curtain grid. So let's do that. Let's go to the curtain grid command, and we're just going to put another grid, and we want it to line with the top of the door, but we'll get to that in a second. Do you see how when I try to place the grid, it puts it along the whole length of the wall. We don't actually want a grid along the whole length of the wall. We just want a grid between these two grids that we just put in place that are on the edges of the door casing. So again, if you come up here, by default, it puts a grid along the whole wall. But if you click this, it will only put it in between one segment. So now instead of putting it along the whole wall, it's just putting it in between the two grids that I already had. So I'm going to click, and it'll now split that for me. Now there's a panel up above the door, and there's a panel in the door. All I have to do is tab select, unpin that panel, and change it to empty. And then I'm also going to align, just going to align that grid to my, using the align tool. Okay, when in doubt, sometimes it's hard in 3D, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut an elevation to look at that wall with. There we go. Now I'm going to get that grid, and I'm going to move it to my wall, to the top of my door. Okay, now while we're in the view, you can see it looks pretty good. I'm going to bring my door back. This is the wrong style of door for this kind of paneling, but we're not worrying about that right now. Last thing you might want to do is now redistribute the grids because they are a little uneven because of everything we've done. So I'm going to click these, just click on the grids and redistribute them. Oh, okay, it wants to move that grid. So we're going to use a reference plane. Revit will always keep you on your toes. Let's see if we use that as our edge, if it does better. It's not wanting to do that. It's because I forgot to unpin. So let's grab these grids and unpin them. And now let's try it again. There we go. Perfect. And then let's do that on this side. Let's unpin it. And there we go. Okay, so that's that. Now let's talk about that last panel type. Let's go back to this file here. One thing I didn't show you before is, in addition to curtain panels, there's a section in here called curtain panels. There's a section here called mullions. And then there is something else called curtain wall. And then it's got nested in parentheses. And if you click on one of these, you'll see that they're a pre-built curtain wall. So it already has a top mullion, a bottom mullion, and a panel inside of it. So if I click over here, you can see it's a curtain wall. And if I click edit type, you can see it's the same parameters that you've been seeing on the other walls that we showed you. Okay, so all these are pre-built curtain walls. But if you look over here, I have them in parentheses. They're called nested because they're meant to go inside of these curtain walls. Okay, so let's talk about this. We're going to click on it and click edit type. And first I'll show you how we've done it, and then I'll tell you maybe why we did it. But I've got to show you two examples. So when you open this wall, in the first section where we normally have a curtain panel here, instead of a curtain panel, we've put another wall here, another curtain wall. So when you look at this list, you see how it says curtain wall to indicate that it's not a wall panel that we're placing inside here. It's another curtain wall. And it's the one that says nested standard flat panel. So that's a little bit different than what we've been doing. So I'm going to click OK. If you recall, when you select a curtain panel, you can replace it with a couple things. If you go back to the video where I talked about curtain wall anatomy, you can replace it with curtain panels, curtain panel doors, a system panel, so either glass or solid, or you can replace it with another wall. And in this case, we've replaced it with a curtain wall. So if I want to, for example, just even in this wall, let's click it. Let's just change it. Let's look at some examples. If I scroll all the way up, here's an exterior wall that's got brick on it on one of the sides, I think. Sorry, this is a Revit default template, so I don't really actually know. There we go. Okay, so that's just a basic wall. And you've seen we've put panels in there. But now, if I scroll down to where the curtain walls are, you can see a list. These are all these are all meant to be nested inside of another curtain wall. If you keep scrolling down, you can see these curtain walls here. They start with trim. So let's nest Louis XIV panel in there. Okay. So it looks like it's a panel, but the difference is it's got this mullion at the top and the bottom that's pre-built into it. So it's a regular panel family also with this top and bottom rail. And that becomes important when you're building complicated wall paneling. It's important to be able to get that top rail in because there's no other way to get it other than nesting a curtain wall inside of another curtain wall. So let's go back to this. Other than that, one small detail, most of this is built how you would expect it to be built. The only other difference, or similar to this wall, is what I should say, to our other examples that we've looked at, it's built very similar. The only difference is the panel type, which is actually a curtain wall, and then we've set vertical mullions. And the vertical mullions are just, it's the same rail that's going up and down. And so vertical and horizontal, it's just this, I think it's 3/4 by 3 inch. It's just a rectangle. So you'll see it automatically puts those in for us, both on the horizontal and the vertical. So basically, to show you kind of the difference in behavior, if I click on the curtain grid command and I add a curtain grid to this wall, do you see how it just breaks the panels up? I'm going to put this back to the way it was real quick. And you can see it's got some funny behavior here, but this is one of those reasons I think I mentioned in a previous video. Sometimes you just need to redraw the wall to get rid of some of this funny behavior. This wall needs to be redrawn so that it matches exactly these other ones, but we're not going to deal with that right now. But basically what I'm trying to show you is when you put a curtain grid here, it breaks the wall up. Here, when I put a curtain grid in, it not only breaks the panels up, but do you see how it's got this rail again at the top and the bottom? It's because this nested curtain wall has a built-in rail at the top and the bottom. And the reason we like that is because if this is chair rail, let's turn this into chair rail, you would need this rail here. You would need this rectangle rail, chair rail, and then rectangle rail again for it to look right. So let's do that. This is also a good opportunity to show you a new tip. I'm going to tab select till I get this mullion because I don't want it to be a 3/4 by 3 inch rail that's matching all this flat. We want to change this to the cap profile. So the first thing I got to do is I want to select all of these mullions. So when I select one, I'm going to right click and it says select mullions. I'm going to select all on the grid. And now it selects all of them. I don't have to get them one by one. Then I'm going to unpin them. And then I'm going to change them to, let's go to standard. That's what we're doing is we'll do standard cap. Click that. And now it places our cap profile. So now we have a chair rail and it looks correct. The only thing is, this is another tip and trick. Do you see how now the crown's being cut? This side is taking priority over the crown, and it's also taking priority over the chair rail. You can fix that really easily. If you click on the mullion and you click this, it'll push it through. And it's the same thing on this side. If you just click, it pushes it through, and that's all we'd have to do up here too, is make that the priority. So now we've got this looking correct. If we didn't nest this panel in, if we didn't nest the curtain wall into another curtain wall, you wouldn't be able to get this top and bottom rail. So let me show you what that would look like if I edit this family. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to take out, instead of nesting a curtain wall, I'm just going to take this same panel and nest it directly into the host curtain wall. So we're going to move from curtain wall, and we're just going to go find the standard panel. So standard flat panel. So this right here, this is a curtain panel. We're going to click that and click OK. And now do you see it removed? It's only putting the panel in rather than a curtain wall. And because of that, we lose the rails at the top and the bottom. So in this case, it's not what we want. So I'm going to replace that. Okay, I know that was a long-winded explanation, but I wanted it to be clear why we're nesting a curtain wall inside of another curtain wall. It's so that we can quickly create this style of paneling and have it look right when we add things into it. Now you might say, what if you want to divide the top now that can become a little bit annoying because we're not going to put a chair rail up higher, but maybe we want a higher division because maybe this wall, instead of being 8 feet, is 10 feet tall. And we want there to be 2 panels up above. So let's add a curtain grid. Oops. This is the other thing to be careful of. This is why I explained this to you. You have to know that there's a curtain wall, because when I go to put this grid in, do you see how it wants to put it along the full wall? That's because I'm adding it to the actual curtain wall. If I go over just a little bit, it's letting me add a curtain grid to the nested curtain wall, which is not what I want to do. I want to add it to the entire wall. So we'll click the entire wall. And now, instead of dividing it how I had expected, well, it divides it how I expected, but the problem is it's putting this rail now here. We want the rail up here, but we don't want the rail where we just put this in. So what do we do about that? Well, it's easy. You can just go to the nested curtain wall and you can just delete the 1 mullion. You can tab select till you get these mullions. You can unpin them and delete them. And then that does what you wanted it to do. We undid this again on accident. So we'll fix that. But so you could go along and do that along here. The other thing is, if you're not going to have chair rail and you want the whole wall to behave this way, then in that case, you don't have to use a nested curtain wall. Okay, sorry, this is starting to get confusing. The best thing I can suggest, if this is still confusing to you, is to practice and just be deliberate and be careful about everything you do, and you'll start to understand how curtain walls work. But in general, this is also why we have pre-made these for you, is so that you're able to just go without having to worry about all this. So if I just create similar, in fact, why don't I bring this? We'll bring this into the example that we've been building, and we'll place this and click OK. We'll set it to our wall height, which is 9 feet. And then create similar. And now all we have to do is draw the wall. And it will place all of that paneling for us. Just need to make sure I'm getting, I probably should have done this in the plan view, but this will at least give you the idea. And then it's just like we did with this opening. For this window, we'll just have to go in and create the opening. Okay, I promised you one thing earlier, and that is to show you how to delete curtain grids that have been placed by Revit automatically, because we talked about it's really hard to get rid of those. So I'm not going to do it on that wall because it's harder to select the mullions or the grids. I'm going to do it on this wall. So let's say this is a grid that was put in by Revit, and you can see it's unpinned, and when I try to hit the delete key, it won't delete. So what you have to do is you have to change this from the pre-made curtain wall to just a non-pre-made wall. So you're going to have to change it to the default curtain wall. So you just do that. And then it's telling you it wants to delete mullions. You can either delete mullions or you can keep everything that Revit put there. So we're not going to delete mullions. We're just going to click OK. And it will keep everything that was there before. But now this is the default wall. And if you look at the default wall, there's no rules in here. So because there's no rules, you can now delete anything in here without an issue. So now I can delete that curtain wall grid. I can come in here. I can delete anything now. Now there's no unpinning necessary. There's no real rules. So that's the workaround I talked about earlier, but I didn't show you yet. Okay, happy experimenting. It's going to get complicated. It's going to get messy before it gets better. It's okay. Invest the time to learning how to do this, because it can save you time. If you're doing complicated finished carpentry, it will save you a lot of time. Building this by scratch, or in-place families, or even good Revit families don't really replace a curtain wall. You can do a lot of things. And we've given you a lot of pre-built walls, like if you want a ribbed accent wall. So this is like a half round. This is trendy lately, or at least in my area it is. You can do that. Somewhere there's shiplap. Okay, slat accent walls are also another use for this. Let's see. One of these styles has beadboard is another use for this. You can quickly place beadboard. And shiplap, one of these has shiplap. There's just a lot of things you can do with this that takes a really long time if you're not using curtain walls. So I highly recommend this. So be patient, take the time to learn it. Also, curtain walls aren't always the best solution. As I pointed out in one of my earlier videos, there's different ways to skin the cat. If it's not working for you and there's no value in using a curtain wall, use a different method that is easier and fits your project. Okay, that's it for curtain walls. In the next videos, I'll teach you about some of the other components that come with our products.